Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Kelly James and I will be helping to facilitate today's public meeting on the Willamette Valley System Draft Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement, also referred to as the EIS by our presenters. I would first like to say how much we appreciate everyone's willingness to call in today to learn more about the EIS. Your engagement is just as important to us in a virtual setting as it is in person, and we have a team standing by this afternoon to ensure the virtual public meeting goes smoothly. The purpose of today's meeting is to brief interested stakeholders in the public on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, or the Corps' Willamette Valley System Draft Programmatic EIS. This information session will include information on how to review the document and submit comments for the public record. For those with hearing impairments, WebEx does have closed captioning capabilities. You can turn this on at any point by clicking on the CC icon in the lower left-hand corner. There will also be a Q&A portion of today's proceedings following the presentation to provide us with an opportunity to clarify any questions you have. Please feel free to submit your questions for the presenters using the chat function. You can enter a chat by clicking the chat icon in the lower right-hand corner. All questions submitted via the chat will be addressed during the Q&A session following the presentation. During the Q&A portion of the meeting, I will repost and read aloud questions received via the chat so that all participants on the WebEx can see each other's questions as it is being addressed. Once we have gone through all the questions posted in the chat, I will call on those who are listening in on the phone only for questions. I will go over the procedure at the start of the Q&A portion of the proceeding. Please note, although the formal comment period is currently ongoing through January 19th, 2023. This is not a formal comment period venue. Any questions and comments provided during this informational session will not be entered into the official NEPA record. Information will be provided during the presentation on how to submit comments for the record. Instructions are also provided on our project website. Now, I'd like to introduce the Corps' team members who will be presenting and listening in on the phone this afternoon, including our Willamette Valley Project Deputy Operations Manager, Mr. Dustin Bengtson. In addition to Mr. Bengtson, we have Nick Knudsen, the Project Manager, and Kathy Warner, the Technical Lead and Water Supply Specialist, presenting. We also have the following subject matter experts on the line to help answer questions. Rich Pizowski and Greg Taylor, our fish biologists, Norm Bucala, the water quality specialist, Garrett Dorsey and Wendy Jones, our wildlife biologists, Margaret Ryan, our hydropower economist, Dennis Johnson, our socioeconomic specialist, Christy Johnson, our recreational specialist, Molly Kasperson with expertise in cultural and tribal resources, Catherine Tackley on implementation planning, Chris Gaylord, our public affairs specialist, Emily Barajas, today's chat monitor, and myself, Kelly James. I'm an outreach specialist and tonight's meeting facilitator. I would now like to turn it over to the Willamette Valley Project Deputy Operations Manager, Mr. Dustin Bengtson, for opening remarks. Dustin? Oh, I'm sorry, Dustin, you're muted still. Or we can't hear you.
How about now, Kelly?
Loud and clear, thanks.
There we go. Sorry, folks. Good afternoon. As Kelly said, my name is Dustin Bengtson, and I'm the Deputy Operations Project Manager for the Willamette Valley Project. I've been here since 1993, and I get the pleasure of supporting a team of people who operate and maintain the 13 dams, the reservoirs, the lands, water, habitat, and recreation areas that make up the Willamette Valley System for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Next slide, Kelly. Development of this system began at the turn of the last century with construction of bank protection revetments designed to keep the Willamette from cutting new channels through agricultural lands during high flow events. And subsequently, after several investigations and authorizations, dams on the tributaries of the main stem Willamette were constructed from 1939 to 1969, beginning with Fern Ridge and ending with the construction of Blue River. We've operated the system since that time to manage flood risk by reducing peak flows from winter storms, by storing water temporarily during flood season and releasing it as storm events subside and stream flows attenuate. Slide 3, Kelly. We conservatively estimate that the Willamette system prevents over $1 billion of flood damages in any given year. It also provides several other important benefits as well, including fish and wildlife habitat, water quality, water supply, recreation, hydropower generation, and we even have a navigation authority. The current environmental impact statement for the Willamette was developed when I was in junior high school back in 1980, and since then, much has changed. Salmon and steelhead, bull trout as well, were listed and protected under the Endangered Species Act. Any number of terrestrial species on the project are also protected by the ESA. Our water equality laws have changed. Laws related to the protection of cultural and historic resources have changed, as has our relationship with the tribes. And the availability of water, the demand for hydropower have also changed, and our responsibilities to the public represents a much more complex balance than we've ever had to manage in the project's history. We have new structures and new tactics for operations that affect the balance of our benefits, and we recognize that conditions have changed in the basin over the last 42 years. It is our responsibility to continue to understand and spotlight trade-offs, and we invite you to participate in the process. We initiated an update of our environmental impact statement a couple of years ago. It feels like a much longer time than it has been. In 2019, we reached out and talked with you in scoping meetings. We listened to your comments, and we developed an array of alternatives for operating and maintaining resources and assets moving forward. A team of biologists, planners, managers, and engineers analyzed the potential impacts of these alternatives, and this is our draft EIS for your review and comment. Next slide, Kelly. The proposed action for this system is about continuing to support the authorities that we have, primarily flood risk management, while complying with the Endangered Species Act, treaties, and all laws and regulations that apply to our mission. Next slide. And in doing this, we strive to navigate that very narrow path that balances these varied responsibilities. Most often, those priorities are in tension, meaning they compete with one another. We appreciate your help in understanding that tension and informing this environmental impact statement process. That engagement helps us to develop a solution that considers your perspective and hopefully provides the best balance of benefits that we can achieve in the operation of our project. We're looking to find the best possible outcome, the optimized benefits of a complex system of dams and reservoirs for our communities, the environment, for fish and wildlife, and all of us who live here. And it's a delicate dance that has no perfect solution. Our intent today is to provide an overview and help you focus your attention so that you can substantively engage in this process. Next slide, Kelly. For all of us, the challenges in complying with laws reflecting regional and community values, driving sustainability while protecting lives and property is difficult. And depending on your specific interests, you could feel like a winner or you could feel like a loser in this process. And I'd ask you to consider the bigger and broader picture, to recognize the tough balance we must facilitate, and to realize that everybody is giving up something, and in turn, everybody is gaining something. No one is going to get exactly what they want the way they want it. We're not here to debate legal requirements, and we really risk wasting time if we do so. We're here to comply with the law of the land and the recent litigation outcomes. I do want to thank this hardworking team of public servants that have been working on this draft EIS for such a long time. I want to thank the folks that have participated in the process and who will continue to contribute comments on the draft EIS. Thank you to our partners who have stayed connected to this all along. In the end, we're stewards of your resources. People are at the heart of what we do, and we really value the investment of time today. On behalf of the Portland District U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, I want to sincerely thank you for investing your time and energy in this important effort. And with that, I will transition it over to our project manager, Nick Knudsen.
Thank you for that introduction, Dustin, and thank you all for being present here this afternoon. My name is Nicholas Knudsen. I am the Acting Project Manager of the Willamette Valley Environmental Impact Statement. I'd like to start off with just offering what we hope you walk away from this whole information session. First off, I'll endeavor to provide a broad overview of the Environmental Impact Statement, how it's developed, and where we are in that process and when we'll be done. Following that, I'll pass it over to Ms. Kathy Warner to go through the document itself, where she'll provide a framework of how the document is laid out, as well as go into some level of overview of the contents. All of that is to prep you for public comments, because we want to hear them. We will also, at the very end here, provide a way for you to comment or provide information so that you can comment. Next slide, please. Before we go into anything, I want to first off thank all of our cooperating agencies. A process of this nature, of this magnitude, doesn't get very far without a lot of coordination and communication. And we have the great benefit of working with some very great agencies and people in those agencies who have been actively engaged throughout this process. Thank you all for all that you have done to get us to this point and for your active and continued engagement as we move through this process. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to briefly go over our EIS timeline or environmental impact statement. An EIS falls under what we call the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act. And NEPA has laid out in a series of steps that we have to follow. But what is an EIS? Well, the purpose of an EIS is to support environmentally sensitive decision making. And whenever an agency wants to change how they operate, we need to go through this process. For the Corps of Engineers and this environmental impact statement, that process began with step 1, project initiation, back when we released a notice of intent to the public on April 1st, 2019. That document included some information about our proposed action and some proposed alternatives, possible alternatives, as well as some proposed scoping parameters. We then moved immediately into a public scoping phase where we engaged with members of the public, federal, state, and local agencies, as well as tribal partners to try to put some parameters on this so we could understand what should be included within this document. Following that, we developed our alternatives with the following constraints. First off, we didn't want to impact our flood risk management mission. We consider that to be of paramount importance to the success of this region, and we did not want an outcome that could impact that present in this EIS. Secondarily, we didn't want to eliminate any of our other authorized purposes. And finally, we wanted to provide the widest range of alternatives possible. From there, we went ahead and did an analysis of each of those alternatives, and from that information, we analyzed the impacts of those and were able to identify a preferred. Now, all of that information brings us up to the present. All of that information has been packaged into what we are calling the Draft EIS. Now, the Draft EIS went out for public comment back on November 25th. It will be out for public comment for 55 days, closing on January 19th. So that's where we are today. We want your input on this. That's why we're doing this. But one question I get a lot is when we're going to be done. And so we'll go there next. So the NEPA process itself is done whenever we publish a record of decision, and that is typically 30 days after we've published a final EIS. Our timeline for that is somewhere in late 2024 at this point. That final EIS will include responses to all the comments made throughout this period, as well as any changes that we make to our preferred or I believe selected alternative at that point in response to your comments. Now, you'll also notice there's a bullet there. We align with a biological opinion. We're going to go into that now. Next slide, please. Okay, so under NEPA, federal agencies are required to consider potential impacts of their proposed actions, and that includes impact to endangered species. And what has happened since the last time we did an EIS? Well, we've had ESA listing of bull trout, upper Willamette River winter steelhead, and spring Chinook salmon. Next slide, please. So where does that leave us? Well, essentially what we have are two interrelated pathways or processes going on simultaneously that feed into each other as we move throughout this process. On the top there, we've got the NEPA process that's where we're developing this EIS document. In that document, we've developed our alternatives. We've done an analysis of all those alternatives on the environment. That analysis feeds into a specific analysis of the effects to our ESA listed species in a document called a biological assessment. Our preferred alternative then is fed into for analysis on a proposed action to our ESA species. That document will be passed along to our partners, the National Marine Fisheries Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, for consultation, where they will draft a document called a biological opinion. The biological opinion will be then fed back into, or information from the biological opinion will then be fed back into the final EIS, where we incorporate those findings. So two interrelated processes, separate, but equally important. Hopefully that information demystifies a little bit about where we're at, why the development of the EIS falls under NEPA and the steps where we are now, where we're going, how it relates to ESA and those ESA listed species. To walk us through a little bit more about the document itself, an overview of our alternatives, and a little bit more information about how to publicly comment, I'm going to pass it along to Ms. Kathy Warner. Kathy, over to you.
All right, thank you, Nicholas and Dustin, for kicking off this meeting for us. All right, so I'll walk you through the environmental impact statement, the document itself, and also some of the contents within it. So one item of note is that this is a programmatic environmental impact statement. And so this programmatic approach is a process where we can look at broad programs and issues. So this is a very large project. It's the Willamette Valley System. As noted earlier, it's a system of 13 dams. We have revetments and other features. And so we are taking a programmatic approach to how we will continue that operation and maintenance of this system. One item that is allowed under programmatic is allows for tiering. So we can look at smaller and more detailed site-specific projects into the future. For example, like in a construction project for downstream fish passage structure. One note is also that there are some measures within this EIS that will be fully covered under NEPA and fully evaluated under NEPA and would not require subsequent tiering and subsequent NEPA documentation. The NEPA document, also the EIS document, looks at characterization of effects. We're looking at the magnitude, the duration, and the geographic extent. From magnitude, is there no effect or is it just really small, or does it go all the way up to a major effect and very noticeable and very impactful? And duration, is it short-term? Is it just during a construction aspect of it? Or is it a long-term impact that continues through the life of the project? And a geographic extent is how far does that effect go? Is it just local? Is it the one tributary? Is it a whole sub-basin? Or is it the entire basin, the entire Willamette River basin wide? So I want to lay out the chapter overview for you. So chapter 1 is the introduction, provides the background on NEPA, the Endangered Species Act, as well as the Willamette Valley System. Chapter 2 is where we get into the overview of the development process. We talk about the measures that we're evaluating and how those measures were combined into alternatives. And then it also describes the no action alternative and the action alternatives themselves. Chapter 3 might be kind of considered that heart of an EIS. We're talking about the environment, the affected environment. What's on the ground right now? What does it look like? How is it working? And then we go into the environmental consequences of all of the actions, the no action alternative as well as the action alternatives. The chapter 4 is the cumulative effects analysis. This is where we look at actions occurring outside of our jurisdiction that are also going on within the valley. Chapter 5 discusses the preferred alternative selection, as well as the implementation plan and adaptive management plan. Chapter 6 summarizes the public involvement and describes the public involvement process to date. Chapter 7 is the compliance with the environmental laws and regulations and other executive orders. So now let's go into a little bit heart of the EIS itself. So Chapter 2 is a description of the alternatives. It talks about the process and how it was laid out, and then it goes into the details of the measures themselves, and then into the alternatives considered but eliminated from further study. And then it gets into those alternatives considered in detail, and it describes the alternatives, each of the alternatives as a whole. With the alternatives development process, just a quick reminder for folks, or just a little intro. So alternatives are built from building blocks. So a measure is a feature or an activity that can be implemented at one location or whole basin-wide. For this EIS, we categorize these measures as structural, a whole feature that can be built, or an operational measure. An operational measure might be how we're operating the dam itself, which outlets the water is released from, or how much water is released. And then we take these measures, right, as shown over here on the left, and we combine those measures into different alternatives. And it's a different combination to meet the objectives of the EIS itself. And each alternative will have a different combination of fish passage or of temperature or flows, just as examples. So we ended up with 7 action alternatives. We have just a quick summary here, and I'll get into each of these alternatives in a little bit more detail on the following slides. So we have our no action. We have a storage-focused alternative. We have 2 integrated or hybrid structural and operational measures, operational measure alternatives. And then we have 2 operations-focused alternatives, a structures-focused alternative, and then lastly, a refined hybrid alternative. So the no action alternative, we have to have this as a point of comparison for comparing our action alternatives and the effects of those alternatives into the future. So the overall focus of the no action is that system operations and maintenance of facilities that were in place as of spring of 2019, and that date was chosen because that's when the EIS started and was initiated. So this includes, we've got the routine operations of the infrastructure and features, includes the 2008 buyout flows as well as the environmental flows. We have operations that are within the water control manual following the rule curve. We have the fall drawdown for fish passage at Fall Creek, and also temperature operations at Cougar via the water temperature control tower, as well as at Detroit using the spillway. Alternative 1 is the storage-focused measure. So it improves fish passage through structures because those structures allow the pools to operate at a full volume, at a full level. So it also includes measures that, a measure that would increase the probability of refilling those reservoirs, which ends up being these tributary and main stem flows. And it includes structures for both fish passage. It's shown in this picture right here. This is a floating fish screen, as well as a temperature tower diagram over here. And these are examples of structures. Alternatives 2A and 2B are very similar. They are both an integrated water management flexibility as well as operations and structures for passing those fish. So we want to look at this right here is a floating fish screen. This is what would be done at, could be done at Cougar. It includes fish spill at Green Peter, as well as a drawdown at Green Peter. And then the only difference between 2A and 2B is that fish passage operation or feature measure at Cougar. Under 2A, it would be this floating screen structure shown here that would be attached to a temperature control tower, or the existing temperature control tower. And then 2B, it includes a very deep drawdown down to the diversion tunnel level using an operational measure and using that diversion tunnel to pass the fish. So over here, right here on the right is an example of what the reservoir could look like when it's a very deep drawdown. Alternatives 3A and 3B are the operations-focused alternatives, and these look at modifying operations instead of adding structures to be able to pass fish downstream. Those operations include spring spill, and this is an example of surface spill at Detroit Dam, spring drawdown, as well as fall drawdowns. And this is an example over here on the right of a drawdown operation at Cougar Reservoir. We would improve temperatures also by operational features, spring spill, again, looking at this example here at Detroit, as well as strategic use of outlets using the ROs in combination with the spillways to mix temperatures. It includes a habitat and temperature flow regime. And then the only difference between 3A and 3B are where the spring spills and spring drawdowns occur. These were done looking in between basins to better evaluate each of those alternative measures, operational measures to pass the fish. Alternative 4 is a structures-focused measure, and that is structures to pass fish as well as for temperature management. And so this one, you will see the most structures involved for structural downstream fish passage. Again, this example of design at Detroit Dam, and then a temperature tower as well. Alternative 4 also includes an integrated habitat and temperature flow regime. Alternative 5 is also an integrated hybrid alternative of operations and structures. And this is very, very similar to Alternative 2B. The difference between 2B and Alternative 5 is this habitat and temperature flow regime. It includes a refinement of what was in 2B. Alternative 2B, or 5, sorry. The key features here would be a floating screen and temperature control tower at Detroit Dam. It would include a fish passage facility at Green Peter. It would include both a spring and fall drawdown to the diversion tunnel at Cougar Dam, a floating surface collector at Lookout Point, as well as some lamprey passage and infrastructure at adult fish facilities. And then again, a refined integrated habitat and temperature flow regime. Lastly, we recognize that with any of the alternatives selected, not every feature within that alternative would be implemented right away or could be implemented right away. It's going to take time to get these features online. And so we developed a near-term operations measure, which is a set of these interim operations that would improve conditions until that long-term action is in place. Now, this is a very text-heavy slide, and so these slides will be available for later. It'll be posted on our website. So at in the North Sanium, there would be spring and summer spill at Detroit, and then we would use the regulating outlet in the fall for downstream water temperature management. In the winter, we would also use that RO for downstream fish passage, as well as spreading spill at Big Cliff. We do a little bit of this now, but we would be doing more of it and extending that time we are able to do it. In the South Sanium, we would have spring spill at Green Peter, and then using the ROs for fall passage, downstream fish passage. In Foster, there'd be spring delayed refill, and then a fall spill. Mackenzie, we would be using the ROs for fish passage both in the spring and the fall, which would necessitate a fall drawdown and then a spring delayed refill. At Look in the Middle Fork, Hills Creek would have nighttime use of the ROs for fish passage. And at Lookout Point Dexter, there'd be spring and summer spill operations. And at Lookout Point, there'd be a fall drawdown to use the ROs. And at Fall Creek, while we do that Fall Creek drawdown operation now, the near-term operation would be extending that into the winter and then also doing a spring delayed refill operation. So now that we've introduced those alternatives for you, wanted to just give you a quick overview of chapters 3 and 4, the resource topics that were evaluated. So what you'll see here are the main subsections within chapters 3 and 4. Just as an example, this dash means it applies to 3 and 4. So 3.2 and 4.2 are the hydrologic processes, and that's where you'll see the flows and the elevations assessed and evaluated for each of the alternatives. and likewise for wildlife and habitat, hazardous material, cultural resources, and on. I want to note that the effects of the near-term operations measure are included within each resource area as well. Chapter 5 is where we identify the preferred alternative and add an implementation plan and an adaptive management plan. So we just quick introduction. We compare all of the alternatives, and then we provide a summary of the preferred alternative, and then that implementation plan is just for that preferred alternative, as well as the adaptive management plan and governance program to show how we would manage the features into the future and adaptively manage decisions based on what's realized and seen on the ground. Chapter 6 is the public involvement. We identify and present the key issues and resource concerns that were raised during the scoping and raised to date by both all of the agencies, the tribes, as well as the public. We talk about how we've coordinated with other agencies, and then alternative formulation, meetings rooms, and what was done and presented, as well as our DEIS public meeting information. The final EIS will then discuss the issues raised during this public involvement period. So I want to end with just how to comment. So as multiple field posts talked so far, the public comment period is a very, very critical and important piece of NEPA. And it's really important to make sure we understand the public's views on how we should continue to operate and maintain this complex system that provides multiple uses and serves so many people. So all public comments will be included in the record. Public comments can be submitted via writing or via email, and the email address is right here. And then hard copy letters or paper copies can be sent to this address right here. And it would be really helpful if you add as a subject line, the Willamette Valley System Draft EIS, and that'll help us focus that information. In addition to these virtual meetings, we have 4 in-person public meetings. January 9th will be in Springfield in the evening. January 10th will be in Eugene in the afternoon. January 11th will be in Sweet Home in the evening, and then January 12th will be in Staten in the afternoon. And those public meetings will be more of an open house style with subject matter experts at tables, so you can walk around the room and talk directly to a subject matter expert that you're more interested in. And then down here at the bottom, we have this EIS, the project's webpage. So that has the information regarding what's been done to date. It has the documents available, the draft EIS documents, and other information as well. And then for additional information, just wanted to throw up Nick Knutson's contact information right here. So he'll be the point of contact for additional information if you have questions or comments. And with that, I will hand it back to Kelly to facilitate the question and answer period.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you to all of our presenters. We are now ready to begin the Q&A portion of the meeting. We will pause for a moment to allow people to add their question to the chat queue. As we go through the questions, Emily, our chat monitor, will post it in the chat so that all the participants can read the question as it is addressed. I'll also read the question for those on the phone only before asking one of our subject matter experts to respond. Additionally, we want to provide those of you who are only able to call in and are not logged in on the web a chance to ask questions. Once we have gone through all the questions that have been posted to the chat, I will go through each phone number in the participants list that isn't attributed to an attendee on the web. To do this, I will open a line one at a time and will call out the area code and the last 2 digits of your number and ask you to state your question. You can also press *6 to unmute yourself at that time. If you do not wish to ask a question when I call in your phone number, please just say no questions and I'll remute your line and move on to the next caller. Some of you may have both logged in on the webinar and called in separately. I respectfully request that you post your questions to the chat and pass when prompted to verbally ask your question. This will help us to keep within the time allotted for the meeting. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to provide their question, and I will notify you when the 30 seconds is remaining. Please note, all questions provided during this teleconference will be recorded and posted with the presentation to the publicly accessible project website for interested stakeholders who were not able to attend tonight's meeting. So any personal information you share on the call will be public. Agency officials will remain on the line for the entire call to answer your questions. And so we will start now with our first question. If you want to post that, Emily. Question for presenters: how and when can we comment on the biological assessment and biological opinion? And I don't know if Kathy, you want to take this one, or I can take it as well.
Yeah, I can take it. So this one, the services and the agencies are the agencies charged with implementing the ESA. However, the ESA does not mandate a public process like NEPA.
So there isn't a public comment period for the biological
Correct.
assessment or opinion. All right, next question, Emily. Are the slides from today's meeting available for download? They aren't currently, but they will be made available on our publicly available webpage. And I believe Chris Gaylord provided the web site URL in the chat. I can also do so now. We just need to go through the process of getting it online, which just takes a little bit, but we should have it in the next few days. And here's the publicly available website for you to look at that information when it becomes available. Please, everyone, check in on that website often for updates on public meetings, available resources, that sort of thing. And it's also the location where you can download the entire EIS. Right, next question, Emily. If any of the interim measures appear to be successful in meeting ESA fish objectives, is there a process for reevaluating whether to pursue the proposed downstream passage structures? And I'm thinking that potentially
I can
Mr.
take
Rich
this one.
Wysowski, or would you like to do that, Kathy?
Yeah. So the adaptive management framework was provided to show how the agency proposes to utilize the information gained from these research, monitoring, and evaluation activities to adjust operations as appropriate. Now, that adaptive management framework would apply to any of the alternatives ultimately selected. So environmental compliance for those changes would occur in a separate process.
All right, next question, Emily. And if, by the way, if you've submitted a question during this Q&A period, Emily is taking those down and we'll add them to the bottom of our queue. So the next question is, please show chapters 3 and 4 slide again. I think slide 27, so I can see where particular topics are located. Yep, you can see that there. And also these slides will be available online in the next few days, so you'll be able to find it there in the future. It's a cheat sheet. Emily, why don't you throw up the next question? Email again for contact person. Feel free to add any clarifications, but I think you mean you'd like us to show the slide that shows the email contact. And that'll likely be, that's the project email. So if you'd like to ask questions of the project team, please send them via the same project email that you would be sending in your public comments. Next question, please, Emily. Given the directive to the Corps to engage in the disposition study for hydropower in WRDA 2022, currently being incorporated into the NDAA, why isn't the PEIS considered measures alternatives that account for elimination of hydropower as an authorized purpose. And Kathy, I don't know if you want to take this one or someone else from our team wants to volunteer.
Sure, I can take this one. So again, that was the WRDA, and that's the Water Resources Development Act. And once that WRDA is signed into law, the Corps will work through its appropriate processes to implement that charge from Congress. But right now, that has not been finalized at this point. So it will then determine how that may or may not affect this EIS process.
Next question, Emily. Is the 55-day review period prescribed by law, / does the Corps have the discretion to expand the review period? What was the thinking behind starting the review period for a 443-page document the day after Thanksgiving and having the review period include 3 federal holidays, which presumably limits the ability of reviewers to devote sufficient time to the review?
Yeah, so the Corps does have some discretion to extend that comment period and has already done so in light of the holiday season. We did take that into consideration when we were looking at that total time frame. You know, the Corps is also taking its requirement to comply with the court order very seriously, and that has been a major determination to the comment period currently selected. And that period may change in response to public feedback.
Kathy? Next question, Emily. Will the 2008 BIOP be part of the no action alternative or just the flows from the BIOP?
Yeah, so the parts of the 2008 BIOP that have already been implemented by the start of this process are included in the no action alternative.
Next question. Is Nicholas Knudsen the contact person for obtaining supplemental technical information not available in the, I'm assuming in the EIS? The appropriate place to request this kind of information is through the project website, and we will work with our team to determine how to provide that information. Do you want to add anything to that, Kathy, or others?
I think that's concise and that's the best way.
Great, thanks. Next question, Kelly or Emily. At the in-person meeting opportunities, will the Corps be accepting comments for the record, or are there just informational meetings? These will be just informational meetings. However, we will provide hard copy comment cards that folks can fill out and provide the website and email address so folks can provide comments via email on their phones the day of. But we won't have, you know, a recorder there to take people's comments, as it's just an open house information meeting. Next question. Why does this presentation and the discussion of the 2008 BIOP in the executive summary fail to reveal to the viewer/reader that with regard to the BIOP, the U.S. District Court for the District of Oregon concluded that the Corps is violating the ESA because its operations of the Willamette Valley project is jeopardizing the survival and recovery of the listed salmonids and is taking the species in excess of the BIOP's incidental take statement?
Yeah, So this EIS is designed to find solutions for continuing to operate in compliance with the ESA, showing that ESA compliance is a very clear objective of this process, as that is part of that proposed action shown at the beginning of the slide presentation. Is the proposed action is to continue that operation and maintenance while in compliance with all the environmental laws.
Next question, Emily. Will the interim risk reduction pool restriction measures at Detroit Dam have any effect on this process?
So those are independent from this. We're looking at a long-term solution. And so the plan is to be able to, or is assuming that the reasons for those interim risk reduction restrictions have been resolved into the long term.
Next question. How will folks know where the in-person meetings take place at each city? We are just finalizing the confirmation of our venues, and as soon as those are finalized and confirmed, we will post it to the publicly available website. We'll also be providing flyers at certain locations around the valley with this information. We will publicize it through our distribution list, our email list. So if you are not on that email list, feel free to email the project website shown on the slide there and just ask to subscribe in the subject line, and you will be added to our email distribution list that provides updates, major updates for the project. And then we will likely also be sending out social media updates on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter with the location sites. So if you're not already following the Portland district, that's a good way to get some of the major updates. Next question.
Ellie, we are all caught up in the chat. Jody Marshall's question is the next one on there, and it's just right there.
Okay, great, thank you. What is the expected duration of the upcoming biological opinion? And Kathy or Rich, you should be able to unmute yourself now, if one of you could answer that. Oh, actually, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we're proposing the same timescale as the EIS, but that is up to NIMS. So this EIS is considering a 30-year timeframe, so it will be up to NIMS to determine their coverage timeframe and the duration of that biological opinion.
Thank you. All right, we have—
as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife.
Oh, as well as U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We have two folks on the phone that I see. So I will call out the first 3 digits and the last 2 digits. So the area code and the last 2 digits. I'll unmute you. You can also press *6. And if you have a question or comment, please provide that. And then if you don't, you can just say no questions. So the first one is area code 503 ending in 87. And I'll request unmute right now. Again, you can press, I believe, *6 to unmute yourself. Whatever the prompt is. All right, hearing nothing from number ending in 87, I'll go to the next one. The area code is 541 ending in 73.
No questions.
Great, thank you. All right. So that concludes our presentation for today. We will have some closing remarks from Mr. Dustin Bengston, First, I'd like to just thank you all for your interest, time, and flexibility in participating in this informational meeting. We encourage you to continue checking out for updates on our project website. Like we said, in the next few days, we'll be posting the presentation slides for download, as well as this video recording and the recording from the December 6th presentation. And so I'd like to hand it over now to Mr. Bengston for closing remarks. Dustin?
Thanks, Kelly. So the work ahead of us is all about defining, new tactics for continued operations, maintenance, and stewardship of the system while providing better stewardship for important resources while meeting all of our legal requirements. And my hope is that we can get close to consent, if not consensus, among tribes, partners, and stakeholders to allow us to efficiently move forward, adapt, and align. Please focus energy and engage in this process and help us in trying to determine the best path for balancing benefits and outcomes. We need to hear your voice in the process and get to a manageable outcome in an expedient way. I appreciate your time and effort and attention today. Look forward to seeing folks face to face in January, and I hope you found value in this engagement. Thanks, folks, and have a good afternoon.
Yes, thank you all. We appreciate your participation. We'll be closing out this meeting shortly. Thank you, goodbye.
Kelly, there was one more question that popped up in the chat.
Oh, yes, I see that. Is Alt 5 the preliminary recommended alternative or not decided yet? Yes, currently Alternative 5 is the Corps' preferred alternative at this time. It is not a selected alternative. That doesn't happen until the final EIS. And it's another reason why this participation is so important. We will consider public comments in our decision on which alternative, and it may change before the end of the end decision for the final. All right, thank you so much, everyone. I will officially end the recording now and close out our web. Have a nice day.